Hey y'all, I'm Paige Feldman. I'm a writer and director, and here on this YouTube channel, I'm documenting the making of my debut feature as a writer-director. It's called Back to You, and it's a contained romantic comedy. And if you've been following along on this journey, last week you'll know that I shared a response that I received from the WGA legal team when I inquired as to whether I could, without breaking strike rules, without scabbing, do a live table read of my script here on YouTube as soon as it's ready for it, which would hypothetically be in about a month. But unfortunately, the response was basically, if anyone with an internet connection can see this script, and it's the first time that you've put it out into the world, sorry, that's against the strike rules, because potentially someone involved with an AMPTP company or someone who is a signatory to the guild could see it, and that would be scabbing. And I don't want to do anything to undermine the WGA's strike, nor do I want to accidentally scab or purposefully scab, but accidentally would be worse because I'm not intending to do it. So that plan is on hold. And also in that email, there was some language about not self-producing scripts during the strike, and that is why my letterboard, instead of saying proof of concept September 1st, 2023, now says let's go WGA. Because based on when everyone I know has been saying the strike will be over, August or September, I wouldn't be able to mount production once the strike's over in time for that September 1st deadline. So until then, we're going full on WGA solidarity, because let's face it, the strike is super important to the preservation of TV and film writing as a career. So when the WGA resolves the strike, gets what they deserve and need, that means that the potential for a career in writing still exists for me, for all of you out there, and obviously for all of the members of the WGA currently. So in full support of the strike, my plans are on hold, and while there are a lot of things I can do to prepare for when the strike's over, when I can share my script, when I can shoot that proof of concept, one thing that I am doing apart from all that is I'm taking this time, now that I know that I kind of can't be in pre-production on anything, to refill my creative cup. And one way that I do that is by going to the movies and seeing a film in theaters. The in theaters part is really important because the communal atmosphere, the dark room, the fact that if I take out my phone, I'm an asshole. I have to be immersed for however long, the 90 minutes, the hour 45, the 2 hours, sometimes the 3 hours. Even if I hate a movie, I'm stuck there in that story. And because of all my frantic, like, oh my gosh, maybe I have a table read to do, maybe I have a proof of concept that I need to get ready, I hadn't been taking as much time as I should to really get into that go see a movie mode, just relax, set aside that time, and refill my creative energies. But this past Sunday, having already gotten a couple days ago the response from WGA, and being up early because my husband got up early to go on a swim, I decided to check out the movie times. It turns out that at a theater that was walking distance, or is still walking distance, that's walking distance to me, there was a 9:30 a.m. showing of a movie called Past Lives. So Past Lives is a movie I'd only heard about in passing because it had such great notice from Sundance and then also played in Berlin. And it is writer-director Celine Song's, it's her first feature as a writer-director. And it's a romance, and 9:30 a.m. on a Sunday, I can walk to the theater, get a coffee on the way, just enjoy a leisurely morning, and by the time the movie's over, because it's only an hour 45, it'll be just about lunchtime, and I can, have the whole rest of my day. It sounded really refreshing and perfect, so I went for it. And I am so glad I did, because this movie didn't just refill my creative juices and inspire me. It touched my soul. It was just so beautiful. I don't want to give any spoilers, and it's not one of those movies where you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot tell you what happens after this, but you just have to watch. It's this intentional film about this relationship between two people that spans 24 years, from when they're 12 to when they're 36. It's about the way that you can touch people's lives and have this love for them and be fated to be part of their lives without necessarily having this giant epic romance, but Past Lives is still this epic romance, despite it being about these small moments in this fate, this inyon, this Korean concept of fate as it relates to people. And the idea that if you even brush clothes with someone on the street, that interaction, you two were fated to be part of each other's lives. And maybe in a past life, you were something else to each other, or something more, or something less. And there's just so many questions of what is love, and what kinds of love are there, and what does fate mean? And can you be fated with more than one person, and how? It's just so many beautiful questions were asked, and it was... I'm just kind of rambling here, and I think the last time I did this was when I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. But it's a very different movie than that, but there's so many feelings and thoughts that came up. And while so much of it is about like the story that Celine Song is telling, it's also about the way that she's telling it. Because you know me, I love a ton of dialogue. I love talking and chatter and all that noise. And Celine Song's film is quiet in the sense that there isn't necessarily a lot of dialogue filling up all the spaces. But it's not quiet in that pretentious indie film way, if you know what I mean, where people are not talking because the silences are pregnant with information and super poignant and directed. Her silences that she uses are so natural, and within their silences, there's conversation happening with the actors, with their body language. They're staring at each other, they're leaning in a certain way, they're laughing, they're smiling, there's thoughts happening. These are real people having this connection, figuring out what they mean to each other, and why and how and what is supposed to happen next. And those conversations are just as loud as the ones that they're having through dialogue, which is just really special. And I think one of the reasons that it works so well is because of the way that she shoots the film. She isn't using those silences to focus on faces necessarily. It's the whole body. It's the whole performance. It's the way these actors, the characters, these people are existing within spaces. Because you have Seoul and you have New York City as your main settings, and she makes them feel like them being the characters feel like they are part of this landscape, and they're just as important as all of the other things in it. It's a way of setting a character when setting isn't necessarily the thing that you're really thinking about. You're thinking about the relationship between the people who are speaking to each other or not speaking to each other. And if I can move away from like what was on the screen for a moment, one thing that I noticed in the theater is how full it was. Like I said, it's 9:30 a.m. on a Sunday. And this is a small film, real like budget-wise. There's no big actor in it. Celine Song's first film. It hasn't been super hyped. In 9:30 a.m. on a Sunday, too. The theater was a third full. There were probably 30 people in the theater with me who all had this idea to go out on a Sunday morning before 10 a.m. to see this film. And it's not like I was the youngest person in there. There were people ranging from, I think, like 15 or 16 all the way up to like 80. It was pretty remarkable to see how full the theater was and how many people were just engrossed in this film so early in the morning. So I used to work in independent film sales and financing and production. And one phrase that we always used was like, is this film theatrical? And what theatrical typically means is that, is there something that's going to draw people to leave their homes and go to a theater? And what those things usually amount to are giant action sequences, big scares, a big twist, and big name actors. Or big name director, not really big name writer unless you're talking about like Paul Schrader or someone who's like a bit legendary. And Past Lives had 0 of them. This many. Seeing this packed theater was really heartening to me because the film that I'm writing, the films that I have written and that I'm making, they might have the potential to have big stars attached to them. That's when people think makes romantic comedies salable, is the giant A-list stars attached to them. That's a whole other rant about why that's not necessarily correct. But I've been not resigned necessarily, but in the mode of like, realistically, my first few films aren't going to be in the theater because they're not theatrical, because there's not enough spectacle on the screen. But Past Lives is clearly theatrical because the theater was a third full on at 9:30 a.m. on a Sunday. And I checked the movie times because I want to see another movie this weekend. And it expanded like from, I think there were like 5 showings last Sunday to, I think there's now 10 or 12 showings a day. It's nuts. And the movie's quiet. And not because the characters don't necessarily speak a lot, and it's introspective. It makes you, the audience, made me think a lot and contemplate a lot about what is love, what is fate, what is meant to be. When do you have to give up the ghost of someone who you might have loved in the past for the reality of the present, whether it's somebody else who you also love, or the fact that that person doesn't measure up, or maybe you're not even sure if they measure up because you don't know them. All of these questions and thoughts and this story that's beautifully woven between in 3 time periods, from when these characters are 12 to 24 to 36, and across the world from Seoul to a bit in Toronto to New York City. It's epic, but it's also contained because it's just about these 2 people together. And none of that is spectacle. I mean, this is a movie where if you saw it on paper, if I saw it on paper when I was an exec, when I was looking at is it theatrical, I would say no, this is straight to Netflix, this is straight to Hulu, straight to streaming. And that's just doing the movie a disservice, because I don't know if I would have been able to have these thoughts and really connect with these people as much if I was sitting at home, watching on my computer, watching on a TV, even like watching on my iPad on a plane or something. Because in the theater, these 2 people, their issues, their concerns, their relationship becomes larger than life because they're on the screen. They're not on the screen because they're already larger than life. It's the scale of this screen and of this room that makes you that turns their issues into the whole world. And that's not to say that this is something that could happen to any movie, because that would be doing a disservice to Celine Song's just magnificent writing and direction that they mesh so well together. She clearly wrote this knowing how she was going to direct it and then executed perfectly. And if she hadn't executed like this, it might have felt trite and it might have felt cheesy or too like indie film pause and slow and all that. But there's like a magic and a fluidity there as we're traveling forward in time slowly and then sometimes back in time a little bit. And the combination of this epic storytelling, even on a small scale, even between just 2 people where the stakes aren't really that high in terms of like saving the world, but they're huge in terms of these 2 people's lives. And Celine Song, she understood that. She understood the magnitude of what love is and what it does to you and how it makes you feel. And she was able to capture that in a way that when you put it on the big screen, you feel that too. You feel the enormity of these decisions for these people, even though, to quote Casablanca, they don't amount to a hill of beans in this world. And that's all to say that this movie has shown me and proven to me again that any movie can be theatrical. And that is such a ray of hope and sunshine as I look to make my own contained romance film, though mine's a comedy. And that kind of brings me to my next point, which is I went to see Past Lives to refill my creative cup. And it did, and it refilled my soul. And there's so much about this film that I'm thinking about days later, especially the last 15 seconds of it and all of the things it could mean and just the beauty and poignancy of it. And I don't want to spoil it for you, because even if I spoiled it for you, you wouldn't understand it because you haven't seen the film, because it just goes back to a few moments and the significance would be lost. So go see Past Lives, please. But I went to see this movie because I wanted to see a movie. And in the end, I kind of found a comp title for Back to You. And if you don't know what comp title is, it's short for comparative title. And what it means is that you have found a film that is similar to the one that you want to make or write, that you can use to tell people about your film in a shorthand. Jaws on a plane or something. I guess that's snakes on a plane. It's the shorthand for a pitch. Comp titles can also be super helpful in terms of showing you a path forward for your project. How much should it cost? Where is it going to play? Who might buy it? What festivals will you show it at? Etc. Also, like, what grants could you apply for? And like I said, Past Lives is kind of unintentionally a comp to Back to You. They're both romances that span multiple years, about people who come back together after a long time to figure out their relationship. First-time writer-director Celine Song. I'll be a first-time writer-director when I do Back to You. The independent nature of the film in general, like I said, like, where's it gonna show? Contained timeline for when the relationship is going to be rekindled, despite it spanning a bunch of years. And it's culturally specific. There's a lot of stuff about being a Korean versus being a Korean American. It's very interesting. There's also Jewish rep in the film, which is cool for me. But obviously there are differences between Past Lives and Back to You. Namely, Past Lives is a romantic drama and Back to You is a romantic comedy. It is an enemies to lovers story. Back to You is. Past Lives is about friends who have the potential to become lovers. So it makes for a great comp jumping off point for me. And if you'd like me to do a video on comp titles, please drop a like, leave a comment. That's something I can definitely talk about more. But for now, I just want to end by gushing more about Past Lives, because it's so rare that a film makes me feel both inspired and rejuvenated. Often the films that make me feel inspired are ones where I'm like, oh, this was really fun and really good, but like this one thing, I could have fixed it. Or, oh, I love this, it's so beautiful, I want to use that shot somewhere, but like the other parts of the story didn't necessarily vibe with me. And then the things that like really fill my cup, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, for example, are just so good that they're intimidating. But Past Lives, because I think of a lot of those similarities, especially in terms of how it's about two people figuring out their relationship, which is a thing that I love to write, seeing how Celine Song directed it and did so masterfully without the conventions of lots of close-ups, because I also love two shots and framing my characters together. It provided me with such a vocabulary that I know I'm gonna watch this again. I might copy some of the vocabulary that she's using directorially. And also, it's just so interesting, the concept of Inyun and the ways that she's exploring what love is and what love means. That is something that I just enjoy as a human and a consumer of stories. If you are inspired to see Past Lives, I hope you go see it. It's out, I think, in New York, LA, and maybe Chicago as well right now, and it will be out nationwide in the US on June 23rd. If you are not in the US, I encourage you to Google, see when it's going to come playing in your area. And if you have seen it, drop me a comment. Tell me what you thought. Love it or hate it. I love hearing from you. And next week I'll be back with more Cake Fight Presents The Making of, hopefully about how I have finished my draft of Back to You. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.